And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers? Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
The playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
And praying for the same things that we've been praying for quite some time. Norway, Meredith, Jonesboro, and Israel. And honestly, those three biggest things, right? Well, some of the three biggest things right now that I'm praying for. So I just want to share that with y'all. But Lord, just thank you for this wonderful game of football and giving us the opportunity and allowing us to fellowship and enjoy this game that we get to watch and partake in fantasy football with. And we just we appreciate you giving us that ability and allowing us to do that, Lord. Just please be with Norway and her family as she's still undergoing treatments for her cancer, Lord, and just keep giving them strength and comfort and her resiliency, and just please place a hedge of protection over them and put your hand on her. And we just pray for complete healing in her, if it be in your name, Lord. And then also just please be with Jonesboro. Just be with the people that have been affected by these tragedies. Just keep healing and just give some people some comfort and understanding. And also, hopefully they'll turn to you, Lord, in this time of need, because you're the ultimate healer in all things physical and emotional, Lord. And just please be with Jonesboro, and then also with Israel, Lord, as the war and everything still going on over there. Just please be with those people that are under attack, the people being attacked. Just do if it be your will, just let it cease, Lord, in your name. And just please be with the people that have all been affected and hurt by it. And just thank you for everything you can do for us. Please let us shine a light for you, Lord. And thank you for everything you continue to do. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen. All right, guys, jumping right on in our start, sit, sleepers. Not going to go over the parameters that we go by anymore. As I've said before, we've been doing this. This is week 9. So if you don't know the parameters that we go by now, then you should listen to some more podcasts. But first, we're going to thank our sponsors, Big Reed BBQ, Automotive Detailing Solutions, This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck, Mimi's Children's Boutique, and Doug Demona Farm and Feed. Thank you guys for stepping up and supporting us. And y'all, please, if you're listening, please go out and support these people that support us. And if you're in the Jackson Parish, Jonesboro area, all these people can be found around those areas. Please support them. But our title sponsor for this episode is going to be Automotive Detailing Solutions. ADS is not your usual car wash. They provide intricate detailing to groom your vehicle inside and out, focusing on quality over quantity. From carpet and seat extractions to paint polishing, ADS strives to be Jackson Parish's premier automotive detailer. Contact Matthew Smith at 318-475-9492. Add them on Facebook, Automotive Detailing Solutions, or just ask the guys from Dirty Boot Sports about their ADS experiences. All of them speak very highly of ADS, and everything that I've seen done on Facebook from Matt Smith has been excellent. We appreciate you supporting us, Matt. Y'all go out and support Automotive Detailing Solutions. Now we're going to jump right on into our news and injuries. There were some trades that went down, no real big trades as far as offensively, really, other than Donovan Peoples-Jones going to Detroit, which pretty much squashes Jameson Williams' chance at a breakout, in my opinion. But other than that, a few defensive trades. Washington got rid of Montez Sweat and Chase Young. So that was a little surprising. And Chase Young goes to the 49ers, so the rich just get richer on the defensive line there. But other than that, what it does do is tells me that Washington's pretty much selling out their defense which is great news for their offense, as you're going to see in some of our start sit sleepers coming up. But first, let's go ahead and jump right on into injuries. Darren Waller, hamstring injury in the last game, ended up getting pulled in the first quarter, which was great news for me because I started him over Dalton Kincaid. Why I did that, I don't know. Maybe because it was the best matchup in the league. And sure enough, it gets pulled in the first quarter, puts up like one catch, and now he's out this week for sure. They said it's a week-to-week injury, possibly going on the IR. They have not decided as of this time. So, yep, Darren Waller out for the foreseeable future right now. Going on over to Tyler Lockett, who is been banged up for a couple weeks now, actually. He really, as far as I know, has not practiced at a practice for the last, I think, let's see if I can count here. All the way, man, I think it's the last like 6 or 7 practices. Has not practiced, but he keeps suiting up for games, and he's been fairly productive. Last week, 9 targets, 8 catches for 81 and a touchdown. So that's Tyler Lockett, hamstring injury. Did not practice Wednesday. Like I said, he hadn't practiced in almost 2 weeks. So him not practicing is really not out of the norm at this point, but keep an eye on his status because they'll make him active or take away his injury designation right on Saturday sometime or Sunday. So that's Tyler Lockett. Keep an eye on that. Next will be Dameon Pierce. Did not practice Wednesday. Apparently had a ankle injury in the game this past weekend. I did not see it. There has been no word of it being a high ankle sprain, but the coach stated that we will on Monday that we'll see where he's at this week and as the week goes. Now, I mean that's kind of a cloak and dagger, but it's not particularly encouraging. Because instead of him saying, "Oh, he'll be fine, he just needs some rest" or anything like that, he said, "We'll see." And any of you that are parents or were kids and remember your parents saying, "We'll see," we all knew what that meant. Probably not. So, Dameon Pierce ankle injury, Drake London with a groin injury did not practice Wednesday. Watch the practice schedule because he should perform a little bit better under Taylor Heineke because Taylor Heineke is going to start this week. And if Drake London's active, I definitely think with all the buys, he is worth a play. Next will be Justin Fields. He's been out for, I think it's almost 2.5 weeks since he injured that thumb. And this week did not practice yesterday, but has not been ruled out for this weekend yet. Now, don't go getting your hopes up. That doesn't mean he's probably going to play this weekend, but he hasn't been ruled out. So that kind of means he's getting closer, which is why I put this update on here. But Tyler Bagent has already been named the starter, so he will start. But the good news is maybe Fields can get back to practice this week and can possibly play next week. So James Conner, another little update right here. Coach Gannon said that Conner is ready to go and excited to be back. So he is eligible to come off the IR next week. So anybody looking to make any trades or anything like that, James Conner is somebody that you might want to think about. Because he does look like he's going to be activated next week when he is first available, which is good news. Not good news for Amari DiMercato, but good news for James Conner. And if for some reason during these bye weeks somebody dropped James Conner, go out there and pick him up because he will be coming back after this weekend. So that's James Conner. Gus Bus Edwards has been deemed with a toe injury. He's got a tire leak and did not practice on Wednesday. There's been no clarification or anything on this status yet. We'll double check for y'all real quick to make sure there hadn't been any updates on that. Let's see. And looks like he returned to practice today. They just updated it just about an hour or two ago after I wrote this column. But yep, returned to practice today per ESPN. So good news, the Gus Bus, it will be running. Next is going to be David Njoku with an ankle injury. Did not practice Wednesday. This is a new injury. He has not had an ankle injury so far. He did not practice Wednesday. No new updates. Keep an eye on this because honestly, if he's active, PJ Walker ends up starting again. I'm going to want David Njoku in my lineup. So keep an eye on David Njoku. And especially with all the buys going this weekend, tight end is pretty thin this weekend. So I like David Njoku if he is active, and this ankle injury is just him getting some extra rest. Last but certainly not least, what I did talk about on my waiver pod, but I'm going to mention it again because it's an injury segment. Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles and is out for the season, just in case you missed the waiver pod. So he's placed on IR and he is out. All right, now we're going to go ahead and get started on our start, sits, and sleepers. And we're going to go and get started with Clay's start of the week, and that's going to be Sam Howell. Quarterback is actually a lot thinner than people realize this week because we got 3 top 10 quarterbacks on bye, and that does not include Trevor Lawrence. So Clay's going with Sam Howell, who's been very, very serviceable this year. Right now, let's see, ranked at 10 this week, going up against New England at New England. And ironically, Sam Howell is also the 10th ranked fantasy quarterback so far this year. The last couple weeks, I mean, he threw the ball 42 times week before last and 52 times last week. So they are letting him chunk the ball a ton. And a New England offense that's really middle of the road, so to speak. Against quarterbacks, they're giving up right around an average of 18.8 points a game. Last week, they gave up 35 to Tua. A week before, they gave up 28 to Josh Allen. Before that, they did not really give up a ton, but also they've had a slew of injuries the last couple weeks. And they've given up 5 touchdowns the last 2 weeks to quarterbacks. So that bodes very well for Sam Howell, whose defense got a lot worse over the trade deadline. So they're really going to have to throw the ball and score the ball to keep up if they want any chance to win. So I like that pick a lot there. I apologize. I like that pick a lot there, Clay. Let me take a swig of this old Celsius right here. Keep me going. All right. Sorry about that, guys. All right. We're going to go right on into Josh's start of the week. And it's old Joey B, Joe Burrow. Honestly, what can you say? The dude's been rolling here lately, coming in ranked at your 6th ranked quarterback this week. Kind of a gutsy call by Josh. I like it. I agree with it, but he is going up against Buffalo, who ends up being the 2nd ranked defense against quarterbacks on the season so far. But last week against probably the number 1 against quarterback, or number 2, or was last week around. So he went up against San Francisco last week, 28 for 32. For 283 and 3 touchdowns and 6 rushes. That's key right there. 6 rushes for 43 yards for 33.6 points last week against San Francisco. So starting to really look like Joey B's back this week going up against Buffalo. His and not only that, but they're playing on Sunday night. So you got to love Joey B in the bright lights because he's always performed well on prime time. And also, he's really found his connection again with Jamar Chase, which helps that out tremendously. I know I got a buddy of mine that's got T. Higgins that wishes he would find that connection with T. Higgins again. And hey, maybe that happens this week with Tre'Davious White being on Jamar Chase. Maybe T. Higgins gets a chance to get going a little bit more. But Josh has got Joey B, Joe Burrow. And then my start for the week is going to be one that's been on here before, and he's let me down a little bit here lately, but I think this is a bounce-back game for him. That's going to be C.J. Stroud for Tampa Bay. I mean, he had a down week last week, like I just said. He's kind of been on the decline a little bit, but I think this is his get-right game. He's getting a Tampa Bay defense that's given up the 3rd most passing yards this year to quarterbacks. 3rd most passing yards all year so far. And they've given up at around an average of 300 each week for the last 3 weeks on average. So I mean, they're really struggling to contain wide receivers, and the quarterback's been able to get a lot of yardage on them. Not to mention, he's playing at home, and he's really kind of got some home road splits where he plays a lot better at home than he does on the road. And then, not to mention, you heard me talk about Dameon Pierce on the injury report earlier. Dameon Pierce is banged up. Their running game is really struggling, honestly. So why not lean a little bit more on the pass? Let him get those really talented young wide receivers the ball a little bit more. And not to mention, Tampa Bay is not bad against the run game as it is. So I could really see them leaning heavily on Stroud this week and him getting a chance to really put up some points. So I like C.J. Stroud a lot. And that's going to round out our starts at quarterback. We're going to go ahead and roll right on into our sits at quarterback. And for a sit for Clay is going to be Matt Stafford. Can't blame him there, especially if Stafford is still not going to probably play this week. Definitely don't want to start him if he's not playing. But he injured that thumb during the game last week. Didn't practice Wednesday. Didn't practice today in the open portion. But there has been a report of a possible UCL sprain on his throwing thumb, which is very similar to what happened to Justin Fields' thumb. And we've seen him already sit out for 2 weeks because he's having problems gripping the ball, which is very possible with a UCL sprain. So I would not get my hopes up about Matt Stafford starting. Even if he did, he's going up against Green Bay, at Green Bay, cold weather. If he's having thumb problems, you got to grip the ball a little bit more because that ball is typically a little bit harder and a little bit slicker in the cold weather. So it would be a little bit harder for him to grip the ball. That's another thing that you take into effect. But also, Green Bay 6th against opposing quarterbacks this year, only giving up about an average of 17 points a game to quarterbacks in fantasy. But I really don't think he plays, guys. So I would definitely look elsewhere for a quarterback with that being the case. So that's a good call there, Clay. And then a sit for Josh, also Stafford. So we don't have to go over that again. Yep, they were definitely in sync on that. Sitting them with that idea to sit Matthew Stafford. And then for me at sit, I've got a guy that's been really down compared to where he was last year so far this year, but that's going to be Geno Smith going to Baltimore. And I mean, it's probably really hard to sit Geno this week because a lot of people that probably drafted him, he's either their second quarterback on their team and their first quarterback's on bye, or maybe you had Kirk Cousins and Geno was your backup. I don't know what it is, or something like that. But if you can, there's three other top. Like I said earlier, there's 3 top 10 fantasy quarterbacks on bye and Trevor Lawrence. So that's really 4 guys. If you're in a 10-team league that are going to be on bye that are probably starting on somebody's team, and then you take Geno out of there, and it gets slim pickings. But if it is possible, I like some of the guys that I've talked about on waivers, and then we'll talk about this pod a little bit. I like Derek Carr. I like Gardner Minshew a lot better this week. But so back to Geno Smith, and Baltimore's only allowing 13 points a game to quarterbacks, right? And they've only allowed more than 20 points once all year to a quarterback. So this week at Baltimore, I'm sitting Geno Smith if I can at all help it for sure. That's going to round out our sits at quarterback. We're going to go ahead and roll right on into our sleepers. And Clay is got Aiden O'Connell as a sleeper this week at quarterback, which I think is a great pick. Going up against the Giants, who have not been that great on defense. They're kind of middle of the pack against quarterbacks, but really not that great. But they're giving up around 18.9 points a game. Also, unless you live under a rock, then you probably heard that McDaniels, Josh McDaniels, the coach of Las Vegas, was let go, and the GM, because the Raiders have been pretty terrible all year so far, a lot of the players began starting to speak out about it. And finally, they let McDaniels go. And they announced their interim head coach, Antonio Pierce, announced that Jimmy Garoppolo has been benched and Ed O'Connell's going to start. So that probably bodes well for their offense with it changing over. Now, O'Connell's somebody they're not afraid, had a really good preseason, and they're not afraid to let him sling the ball a little bit. Back in week 4, he started for Jimmy Garoppolo whenever he was out for, I believe it was a concussion. And he ended up starting, threw the ball 39 times. Not the best stat line, 238 yards and interception, but he did have 2 rushes for one for a touchdown. So a little bit better, but he can throw the ball fairly well and efficiently, and could end up having a solid week with a new coach. So we'll see. Not a terrible pick there, Clay. Could definitely happen. And then as far as sleeper for Josh and I have the same sleeper at quarterback, and it's the same sleeper I had last week, and that will be Derek Carr. I mean, you can say homer pick, you can say whatever you want to say, but Derek Carr's putting up points. Last week, he put up 26 points as my sleeper. Was good to be for quarterback 8 on the week. And this week, he's getting Chicago. And Lord knows Chicago at home and Chicago in the Dome. Lord knows Chicago's defense has been nothing to shake a stick at all year. And not only that, but Derek Carr has had over 300 yards in 3 straight weeks. So all you haters out there trying to say that Jimmy G was equal to Carr and that or whatever, and that's why they got rid of Carr because G was better, or he's not going to be better. I mean, look at the dumpster fire that Las Vegas is in right now. Had to bench Jimmy G. They're starting a rookie. They ain't won nothing. They got the same team they had with Derek Carr last year, and they were almost somewhat relevant last year. And then now look at us. We got Derek Carr. We've kind of strung together a little. We've been playing a lot better here lately, and he's finally getting acclimated to the offense. So I'm not saying Derek Carr, is Drew Brees or anything, guys, but just give him some time and give him a chance. He's starting to come around. He's looking a lot more comfortable in the offense, getting the ball into our playmakers' hands. And think about it, Olave really hadn't even gotten going good with Derek Carr in the line under center here lately. So I like Derek Carr a lot against Chicago this week. So does Josh. So I think that's a solid sleeper pick, and he's available in like 70% of leagues. So, and that's going to round out our quarterback part of Start Sit Sleeper. Now we're going to jump right on back into our running back Start Sit Sleeper. So at running back, Clay is starting Gus Edwards, the Gus Bus. And as we talked about earlier, had that toe injury, popped up on the popped up on the injury report, but back at practice, and looks to be like he's going to be good to go. Solid pick for Clay. Gus Bus is coming off his best game of the year last week, and that was against Arizona, 19 for 80 with 3 touchdowns and 2 catches for 14 yards. And then the week before that was 14 for 64 with a touchdown and 1 catch for 80 yards against Detroit. So Gus Edwards has had 2 really good weeks back-to-back. And now this week he's going up against Seattle, who's the 17th ranked defense against running backs, that just gave up 133 yards and a touchdown to Cleveland running backs combined for a total of 27.8 points. Now, I will say, don't sleep on Seattle's defense, because they were one of the ones that got, I believe it was Montez Sweat from Washington. And so they beefed up their defensive line a little bit more there in Seattle, and their defense has been getting better as the season has gone. But I think that's a solid pick for Gus Edwards, because Baltimore runs the ball very well, and could definitely be somebody. I mean, obviously, you definitely want to start him, especially with bye weeks like they are right now. Then for Josh at start at running back, he has the same player I have, and that would be Rachaad White. And you might recognize Rachaad White's name, because he's been a sit for Josh and I several times this year in on this Start Sit Sleeper pod. And but Rachaad White, I know he has not been great all year, but the last 2 weeks he's had at least 6 catches and has had an average of 4.3 yards a carry last week against Buffalo. Okay. He had 4.3 yards a carry last week against Buffalo. So this week he gets Houston, who gives up an average of 22.4 fantasy points a game to running backs. And that's the good thing about Rachaad White is he's getting about an 80% snap count of the snaps at running back. So a majority of those points are going to be able to go toward Rachaad White because he does not come out of the game a ton. And this is going to be at Houston in the Dome. We don't have to worry about weather or anything like that. So I like Rachaad White a lot this week. So does Josh. So get him in your lineup, especially with all these buys. He is not somebody you want to sit. And then sitting at running back, Clay is sitting Kenneth Walker. Don't think that's quite a terrible idea. I don't know if many teams are deep enough to sit Kenneth Walker, to be honest, but I can understand why with the injury issues he's been having. Last week only had 8 carries for 66 yards and then 1 catch for 4 yards, but he was kind of banged up with that calf injury. He's not even listed on the injury report so far this week, so that means he's pretty much back healthy. But he's going up against the Baltimore defense, who their only weakness really is the run, but they've been getting better at it. They're giving up an average of about 19.9 fantasy points a game. But last week, Arizona, that's kind of a asterisk there because it's Arizona. But they only gave up 92 yards and 13 points. The week before that, though, against Detroit, 84 yards and a touchdown. Week before that, 112 and a touchdown to Tennessee. But Baltimore has only given up two touchdowns to running backs all year. And that just happened to be week 6 and week 7 back to back. But before that, they hadn't given up one. And then so week 8, they did give up one. So they're the Ravens defense is very stingy on giving up touchdowns to running backs. And I think that's probably where Clay is going that with Kenneth Walker. Also, we've seen Zach Charbonnet kind of start to carve out a role in this offense. So definitely one to keep an eye on right there. If Charbonnet's available out there, I'd definitely pick him up speculative ad because this could be heading toward a 50-50 timeshare with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker eventually toward the end of the season as Seattle tries to kind of keep Kenneth Walker healthy, but also give Charbonnet a little bit more run to see what he can do with extra carries. So I like that sit a lot. And then for Josh sitting at running back, it's going to be Alexander Madison. Can't go wrong with this one. You want to talk about timeshare, Alexander Madison's already in one with Cam Akers right now. And also, unfortunately for him this week, he's going up against Atlanta, who's the third-ranked defense against running backs so far this year, only giving up an average of 15.8 running points to running backs so far each game. And then they're going up they're giving up a total of 15.8 on average per game. Well, if Madison's only getting 50% of the carries and Cam Akers is getting 50%, say they give up 16 points to the running backs, what's that come out to? 8 points a running back? I mean, all you can hope for is that one of them falls in the end zone. Oh, wait, Atlanta has not given up a touchdown to a running back all season. Now, I will say, playing the odds, that is bound to change eventually. Does it change this week or does it not? I don't know. But I can definitely see the reasoning behind sitting Alexander Madison if you can. And not only that, he just really hasn't been that good the last couple weeks. Especially last week, 16 carries for 31 yards and 1 catch. That is a 1.9 yard per carry average last week against Green Bay. So did not look too well last week. But that's Alexander Madison, Josh's sit, and my sit this week at running back is going to be Aaron Jones. Another guy that's really just been hampered by injuries all year. Still nursing a hamstring injury. He's been practicing limited, so I expect him to play this weekend. But there's really not much good to say about Aaron Jones so far this season. He had a great week 1, and then after that hamstring injury in week 1, he's pretty much been limited, either didn't play or didn't play well all year. This week now he gets the Rams defense that's 5th against the running back so far this year, only allowing around 16 points a game. And essentially he's in a timeshare with Austin Dillon and the other running back. I think it's let me see. I think it's Evans. Is that his name? Let's see. Emmanuel Wilson. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the other running back, Emmanuel Wilson there, who's getting just a couple carries here and there, but for the most part, he's just in a timeshare with A.J. Dillon. And anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of good to say about Jones. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, and the Rams have only allowed 4 touchdowns all season to running backs. And so far, Jones only has 1, and that was in week 1. So I wouldn't hold my breath. He's not going to get a full workload because he hadn't had one since week 1. And the Rams are stingy to running backs on defense. He's not getting goal line carries. A.J. Dillon is. I mean, and he's really not getting a ton of catches. He's getting some like 3 or 4 each week, but he's only getting 5 or 6 carries each week too. So not a big fan of Aaron Jones this week. And that's going to round out our sits at running back. And let's go ahead and jump right on into our sleepers at running back. And a sleeper, which is going to coincide with Josh's sit at running back, sleeper for Clay is going to be Cam Akers, which I think is a solid pick. Honestly, like I was just saying earlier, he is working into Alexander Madison's workload right now. Not the best matchup, but he has been fairly efficient at times this year. Not so much last week against a really good Green Bay defense like Madison, but he's getting 1 or 2 catches a week, at least 9 carries the last 2 weeks, including a touchdown last week. So that means he got the goal line carry against Green Bay. So I get what Clay's saying. He's betting that if one of these running backs, Madison or Akers, has a decent game against Atlanta, he's betting that Akers is going to get that. I do think there's a chance that Minnesota leans on the run a little bit more because Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, and they have a rookie, Jaron Hall, starting. They did trade for Dobbs, but they said Dobbs is not going to be ready in time to start or play this weekend. But Jaron Hall is, and so I think it's very likely that we could see a heavier run attack from Minnesota than normal. And does that involve more Cam Akers? Who knows? But I definitely can see the appeal of him being a sleeper. Then Josh's sleeper is the same as mine, which is a guy that we've talked about on this pod several times. He's been on the waiver, but that's going to be Kareem Hunt for Cleveland. This week, playing at home against Arizona. Jerome Ford's still out there. He's still playing, but he's still nursing that mild high ankle sprain. And we seen a real boost in Hunt's workload last week as Jerome Ford was nursing that high ankle sprain. And honestly, Hunt was fairly productive. He got the goal line work. He got a touchdown. This week, he's going to get a much softer Arizona run defense that's given up an average of 28 points a game to running backs. And then not to mention that, but they gave up 3 touchdowns last week to Gus Edwards only. 3 touchdowns to Gus Edwards. So I think Cleveland runs the ball very well, and I think they run the ball a lot against Arizona because it's so easy to be successful against their defense running the ball. And not only that, but I really think there's a chance that Cleveland gets a lot of extra opportunities this week against Arizona because they're planning on starting the rookie Clayton too. And I don't know if y'all been keeping up, but Cleveland's defensive line is one of the best, if not the best defensive line in football right now at rushing the passer. So I expect them to cause a lot of chaos and probably cause some extra turnovers and get some extra possessions for this offense of Cleveland. So I like Kareem Hunt a lot as well there, and so does Josh. So that's our sleeper at running back, and that's going to round out our running back segment. We're going to jump right on into our wide receivers. And starting at wide receiver for Clay this week is going to be Devontae Adams. And a lot of people that got Devontae Adams are probably like, man, I don't know about that because he's been playing terrible. But honestly, he's like, I think he's the number 13 wide receiver in fantasy so far this year. 15, I apologize. 15 wide receiver in fantasy so far. But last week, 1 catch for 11 yards on 7 targets. That one's got to hurt, guys. And it probably did. I know I won a matchup purely based off that poor performance that I was playing against somebody that should have beat me if he would have had even an average week. But a 1 catch for 11-yard game cost that man the matchup. And I was happy for it, but man, that's got to hurt. But Now, like we said earlier, Aiden O'Connell is starting for the Raiders. And you think, well, that's a rookie start for the Raiders. How's it going to get any better? Well, he started in week 4. And let me read you the stat line for Devontae Adams in week 4. 13 targets, 8 catches for 75 yards. Aiden O'Connell knows who the best pass catcher is on his team, and that's Devontae Adams. And he threw the ball to him 13 times. And I'd be willing to bet money that he's going to do that again against the Giants, who have a bottom 10 pass defense in against wide receivers in the NFL, giving up an average of 36.4 fantasy points to wide receivers each week. I mean, there's several. I mean, they gave up 67 to Miami. Now, this ain't gonna be no Miami offense. Don't get me wrong, but week 7 against Washington and Sam Howell, this could be very realistic. 174 yards, 33.4 points. And if Devontae Adams is getting hammered with those targets that much, he's going to be a large portion of that. I like that call a lot, Clay. Definitely like your start at wide receiver there in Devontae Adams. And then Josh has got old Chris Olave. And this is one that everybody as Saints fans is hoping gets going. So do I. I think this is going to coincide with Derek Carr finally getting going, get the offense rolling. I mean, if there's one thing you can say about Olave, he's been getting the targets. I mean, he's averaging almost 10 targets, if not maybe over 10 targets a game so far this year. And I mean, what else is there to say? He's getting the targets, but he just hadn't had the production. Last week, 9 targets, 5 catches for 46 yards. But this week, like I said earlier, getting a Chicago defense at home in the Dome. They just gave up 40 points to Chargers wide receivers with 19 catches for 156 yards and a touchdown. They've given up a touchdown to a wide receiver in all but one game so far this year. Every game, they've given up at least one touchdown to a wide receiver except for week 3 to Kansas City. And we know why, because Kansas City ain't got no wide receivers. All they got is Travis Kelce. I'm just saying. But anyway, so apologize for my son screaming in the background. But yeah, Chris Olave going up against Chicago. This could definitely be a get-right game for him. I like him a lot. So that's a good call there, Josh. And my start at wide receiver is going to be Nico Collins. And, yep, somebody that's kind of been down a little bit here lately. But I think, just like I said with C.J. Stroud, as C.J. Stroud goes, Nico Collins is going to go. And I think it's a good chance that Nico Collins has a solid week this week against Tampa Bay. And just like Stroud, Collins plays better at home. A lot of his good games this year have been at home. He also gets a Tampa Bay defense that's allowing 39.2 points a game to wide receivers on average this year. Not to mention, they give up 54 points on 2 of their last 3 games to wide receivers in the last 3 weeks. So they've given up at least 54 points on 2 of the last 3 games. So solid chance that Collins gets a chance at a big game at home this week. I think it happens. I really think this Tampa Bay-Houston game could be a shootout, or at least we're hoping so. Now, I know that didn't really work out like we thought it did last week with a game we picked on a lot, but I like Nico Collins a lot this week to start against Tampa Bay. That's going to round out our starts at wide receiver. Now we're going to roll right on our sits at wide receiver. And Clay is going to go Gabe Davis. And you know what? I can't blame you, Clay, because I've got this theory about Gabe Davis. And I think he is one that has a good game, bad game, good game, bad game. And you know what? He had a great game last week. So you know what? I think it's time for a bad game. I mean, that's all I can say. He has good game, bad game. Almost all year, it's been that kind of a thing. He had 2 stretches where he had 2 bad games in a row after a good game. Well, last week he had a great game, so he's due for a bad game coming up against Cincinnati. That's all I can say. Other than the fact that he's going up against Cincinnati, who's extremely stingy on defense against wide receivers, especially big plays to wide receivers. They haven't given up a touchdown the last 2 weeks that they played. They had a bye week smashed in there. But last week against San Francisco, only gave up 7 catches for 152 yards, 24 points to wide receivers. And as we know, there's several mouths to feed in this Buffalo offense. And especially with Dalton Kincaid starting to emerge, I think that's a solid call there, Clay, in saying that Gabe Davis is a sit against Cincinnati. Like that call a lot. And then a sit for Josh at wide receiver is going to be Marquise Brown. And completely get it. Rookie quarterback coming in, going up against a solid Cleveland defense, 6th ranked against wide receivers so far this year, giving up only an average of 30 points. And with a rookie quarterback that has no NFL experience at all, coming in playing against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. So you know the weather's going to be cold, probably going to be windy, definitely not prime conditions. And Marquise Brown, even though he's their leading receiver, I think there's a better chance that Trey McBride gets more work in this game than Marquise Brown does. Just sheer to the pass rush. And he's not going to get the quarterback's not going to get a lot of time to throw the ball and push the ball down the field to Marquise Brown. So I like that pick a lot there, Josh. Marquise Brown being your sit. And then my sit at wide receiver is going to be the opposite guy of Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. And they're going up against the Giants, and which, we talked about that with Devontae Adams. It's not a terrible matchup, but this purely goes to Aiden O'Connell and the last time he started and played for Jimmy G. Is whenever Aiden O'Connell started, we've seen a lot of work go toward Devontae Adams. Well, you know what Jacoby Myers' stat line was? 4 targets, 2 catches for 33 yards. And that was against a Los Angeles Chargers secondary that has been pretty much banged up all year and is one of the worst secondaries in the league. 4 targets, 2 catches for 33 yards. That was back on week 4. And also with Josh McDaniels gone, like I was saying earlier, I feel like they really make a concerted effort to get Devontae Adams the ball. And I think Jacoby Myers might be an optimum sell high candidate right now with the run that he had. If you could flip him or trade him for somebody up and coming or somebody that's just recently broken out or even just kind of had a bad game here lately. I mean, heck, if you could trade him for Devontae Adams and maybe throw in a RB2 or a flex or something like that, do it. But yeah, Jacoby Myers is my sit at wide receiver this week. And that's going to round out our sits at wide receiver, and we're going to go right on into our sleepers at wide receiver. And Clay coming in the clutch with a Saints player. That way we've all had a Saints player listed at least several different places. But Clay is saying Rashid Shaheed is going to be a sleeper at wide receiver for the Saints, and I could not agree with him more. Honestly, he shouldn't be being slept on by anybody. Now, does that mean he's going to be started by a whole bunch of people? Probably not, but the dude has definitely been putting up some points. 18 points against Houston 3 weeks ago, and then 32.3 points against Indianapolis last week. Big play waiting to happen. They get the ball to him in multiple ways. He normally at least has a couple catches each week, and then he's also getting carries here and there throughout the season because they're just trying to get him the ball so he can make a play because he's a playmaker. And that's all you can say about it. And he's getting this Chicago defense, like we talked about with Olave, that is not that great really on any aspect. So with Shaheed, I think he's at least a solid flex play this week at home against Chicago with a chance to really impact your team. If he goes off like he did last week, you're talking about a league winner, putting up 30 to 32 points last week. So, I like Rashid Shaheed a lot as a sleeper. Josh's sleeper, Jahan Dotson, somebody that has not been doing well all year and then all of a sudden explodes last week for 8 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown. So got 10 targets last week, 8 the week before. You really love to see that. But honestly, I think Josh is thinking somewhere along similar lines that I am. Their defense is getting sold. So they're going to have to throw the ball to keep up with other teams. That's going to be more volume for Dotson. Not to mention last week, so Washington is going up against New England. Well, last week, Miami only put up 19 catches for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns on the Patriots. And the Patriots have given up a touchdown to a wide receiver in every game this week. I mean, every game this year except for one, and that was the Jets in week 3 whenever Zach Wilson first started. So, yeah, I like Johan Dotson a lot. And also, if people don't remember, Jahan Dotson is a big-time goal line red zone threat. Has a long history of being targeted very highly in the red zone, and it looks like with the way New England gives up touchdowns to wide receivers, that's probably a decent possibility he gets some red zone targets in this game. So I like that pick at sleeper a lot there, Josh. And then my pick at sleeper at wide receiver is going to be Demario Douglas. And this is going to be an injury-related volume type call all the way here because we've seen it before. Injuries to you guys in front of you give people opportunity, give people volume. Well, that's exactly what happened with this. We've seen his playing time increase every week in the last 3 weeks due to injuries at wide receivers in New England. And last week he played 77% of the snaps for New England at wide receiver. And he led the team in catches last week. Had 7 targets, 5 catches for 25 yards. Yeah, that's nothing to write home about. But Kendrick Bourne just tore his ACL. Devontae just got placed in the concussion protocol. And not only that, but Devontae Parker has a history of concussion, so you know he's going to be sitting out this week. And then Douglas gets a defense in Washington that has been selling all their pass rushers and pretty much seeming like they're tanking on defense. So, and not only that, but before that, Washington's defense was 31st in the league against wide receivers. So now their defensive line's not going to get hardly any pressure on the quarterback and going to give Mac Jones even more time to throw the ball. And I think that's going to give Demario Douglas even more time to get open. But Washington's defense has been giving up an average of 46.6 points to wide receivers. And I think this is a great spot for Demario Douglas just to break out of nowhere. Being an unknown wide receiver that he is, I think it's just a great chance that he has a big game against Washington. And this could be another game that might be a shootout that nobody sees coming. So that's going to round out our sleepers and our wide receivers of Start Sit Sleeper. We're going to jump right on into our tight ends. And at tight end at start, Clay has Trey McBride. And that is the same sleeper that Josh has at tight end. So we're going to talk about Trey McBride right here. And I love this pick for both the guys, honestly, because I said something about him on the waiver pod last week, and he was a sleeper for me last week, if I'm not mistaken. And then this week, unfortunately for him, gets a bad matchup because Cleveland is the number 1 defense against tight ends in the league, and they're giving up like an average of 5.9 points a game. The only game anybody had any success against Cleveland was Baltimore, and that was Mark Andrews, and he went 5 for 80 for 2 touchdowns. And then other than that, nobody has had any success, and they've had several good tight ends against them, and they had no success. So, I get the pick because McBride is getting the volume. And if there's one thing at tight end that you look for is somebody that gets volume, and McBride is going to get that volume. But also playing devil's advocate here, if you have another option, I think McBride is the man going forward. But if you have another option this week, I think it's hard not to start them going up against Cleveland. Now, also, Clayton Tune, rookie quarterback, going to be throwing McBride the ball as much as possible. But how much does Cleveland let him catch the ball? And then how much do they have to keep McBride in to block? Because Cleveland's defensive line is so good, and it's going to take Clayton Tune a lot more time to process than any other veteran quarterback. So they're going to have to allow him more time to pass the ball when they do. And I think that's going to result in them keeping Trey McBride in a lot more than people think. But I can see where they're looking at with Trey McBride. He's busted out last week. A really good game last week. I'll go ahead and tell you, 14 targets, 10 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. Now, there's a caveat there. That was Josh Dobbs, not Clayton Tune. Now, Clayton Tune's a rookie, and we know rookies like their tight end, so it could be something along the same lines. But Cleveland's also the number one defense against tight ends, and it could be kind of rocky. But I think you could do worse than starting Trey McBride. And I think he's going to be a top 10 tight end the rest of the season, no problem. But this week, we'll see what happens for sure. But that's Clay's start at tight end. And then Josh's start at tight end is Dalton Kincaid, one that I really like. But honestly did not pick because he was the number 5 tight end. But I get it because he's got the number 1 matchup for tight ends in the league up against Cincinnati, and is coming off 2 back-to-back really solid games of 15 and 17 points for Dalton Kincaid, getting a lot of targets, 8 targets against New England, 7 targets last week against Tampa Bay. And I think we can expect more of the same on primetime football against Cincinnati on Sunday night. Because Cincinnati is giving up an average of 16 points a game to tight ends in fantasy. Last week gave up 9 catches for 149 yards against George Kittle. And you could argue Dalton Kincaid is a lot more athletic of a pass catcher than George Kittle is. So, and George Kittle's an athlete, don't get me wrong, but Dalton Kincaid's a freak athlete pass catcher. And so I like this call a lot there as your start, Josh. And as having Kincaid in multiple leagues, I hope he does very well as well. For me, at start at tight end is going to be Logan Thomas. I know he's been on here. He's been hit and miss kind of all year, but as we've talked about with Washington selling their defense, their offense has got to get somewhat of a boost because they're going to have to throw the ball more and be more productive if they want to even be competitive in games. And also, you're probably thinking, well, he's going up against New England. That's never been a great matchup for tight ends. Well, it wasn't until Matthew Judon, their linebacker, went down about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And ever since he was placed on IR, New England has not been near as successful against defending tight ends as they normally are. But with Washington letting Howell throw the ball more, as I said earlier, I think this is going to lead a lot more targets to Thomas. And as he was limited in practice with a heel injury. Also, I should have led with this. He was limited in practice today or yesterday with a heel injury. He did practice, so that bodes well for him. They could be just managing his reps. He is older, has had some injury history. But Miami's tight end is the only one in the last several weeks, in the last 2 weeks, that has not been successful against New England. And as we all know, Miami really doesn't have a tight end, which is why they weren't successful. But the last 2 weeks before, Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer both had great weeks, putting up at least 16 points against New England's defense. And I think there's a solid chance that Logan Thomas that Logan Thomas can put up somewhere similar production as well as those 2 guys this week against New England. So that's going to round out our starts at tight end, and we're going to roll right into our sits, sorry. And Clay's sit at tight end is going to be Cole Kmet. And this is one that I said sit last week and egg on my face because Cole Kmet balled out last week. And it was a terrible matchup. The Chargers have been solid against the tight end, and Taylor Badgett didn't have a single target. Tyler Badgett didn't have a single target to Cole Kmet week 7, but last week 10 targets, 10 catches for 79 yards. So one heck of a bounce back last week for Cole Kmet. And this week he's getting the New Orleans Saints. Now, Clay, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but old Demario Davis has not been allowing a ton of traffic. Him and Paul Werner have been doing a pretty solid job on coverage. 2 tight ends so far this year. They're 5th in the league against tight ends, only giving up an average of 9 points a game. Now, last week they did give up a touchdown to Indianapolis, which they gave up 14 points to Indianapolis last week. And then against Houston, Dalton Schultz 5 for 72 for a touchdown. That was 3 weeks ago. But I would dare to say Chicago's offense is not near successful as those other 2 offenses were. And this is in the Dome. So this could very well be a very rough game for Chicago's offense against New Orleans defense in the Dome. But we will see. I'm sorry. You're right, Clay. You said sit him, and you're absolutely right. All my points that I just talked about were to sit him, and I was sitting here thinking, like I did last week, to say start him. My bad, guys. Good job, Clay. Sit Cole Kmet against the Saints in the Dome. I apologize, but yep, got confused there. Cole Kmet sit against the Saints in the Dome, and then Josh's sit Tyler Higbee for the Los Angeles Rams. He's going up against the Green Bay Packers at Green Bay. Honestly, if Matt Stafford doesn't start, I mean that's nothing to it as well. But also, Higbee just really has not been that productive or that great of a player all year. I mean, until last week, he only had 3 targets for 3 straight weeks in a row. Last week had 7 targets, 5 for 49 at Dallas. But this week at Green Bay, I think where Josh is going at this more is the fact that he doesn't expect Stafford to play. And in that instance, he probably doesn't expect Tyler Higbee to be very productive at all. And I completely agree with that for sure. And then my sit at tight end is going to be old Jake Ferguson for Dallas, going to be playing at Philadelphia. And honestly, Ferguson, he salvaged his week last week with a touchdown, but and it was only his second touchdown of the year, and his last touchdown before that was week 2. We've seen Ferguson's targets decline significantly over the last 3 or 4 weeks, with 4 being the most he's had in a game in the last 3 weeks, and he's only got a total of 8 targets in the last 3 weeks as well. He really. And honestly, another caveat to what I was thinking, you can't score the ball or you can't score fantasy points if they don't throw you the ball. Just like John Madden used to always say, Kyle and I used to laugh about all the time. You can't win the game if you don't score points. That's it. Anyway, so, but also, I think another reasoning behind me saying sit Jake Ferguson is I just think they're going to be inclined to keep him in to block more, because Philadelphia's defensive line is very formidable and a solid pass rushing defense for Philadelphia, and they're going to try to give Dallas wide receivers as much time as possible to get open, which wide receivers have been very successful against a banged up, vulnerable secondary of Philadelphia all year. So I think with their wide receivers having so much success, why not protect Dak a little bit more, give them a little bit more time, and keep Jake Ferguson in the block a little bit more? I mean, and like I said, Cole Kmet was in this spot last week, had not the greatest matchup, and just did not look like it was going to be a great week for Cole Kmet, and he blew up. So who knows? Jake Ferguson might blow up this week, even though everything points to him not having a good week, but we'll just have to see. My sit at tight end, Jake Ferguson. Then we're going to swing right on over to our sleepers at tight end. And the sleeper for Clay is my same sleeper. And he is the same sleeper at tight end that I had last week. And honestly, he might be the same sleeper next week, because I really don't know. Nobody ranks him high in whatever category he's in, but Taysom Hill, the Swiss Army knife for the New Orleans offense, gets involved in every aspect of the offense that you can think of. But this week, getting Chicago at home, who we've been talking about picking on this whole pod, is not very good on defense at hardly anything. And they're not the worst in the NFL at anything, but they're in the bottom 10 in the NFL at everything. And last week, he did it again. He came out, produced in another way. New Orleans offense is doing a great job at getting him the ball in creative ways, and he's making plays. And for a guy he does well at everything. He does pretty well at everything. And for a Chicago defense that's not very good at defending anything, I think this is just a great spot for him to be put up some fantasy points and be a solid spot start at tight end again, especially weeks with a lot of buys. So I could give you the stats for Chicago against tight ends on defense, but we all know he might throw the ball 4 or 5 times for 50 yards and a touchdown. He might run the ball 10 times for 80 yards and a touchdown, or he might have 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. We don't know. But right now, Taysom Hill is the cheat code at tight end, especially with a lot of guys on bye. And Clay and I both like him a lot as a sleeper this week. So if you need help at tight end, chances are Taysom Hill's out there. Go pick him up and fire him up and start him at tight end. And then last but certainly not least, Josh has Trey McBride as his sleeper at tight end. You heard me talk a lot about Trey McBride earlier. Nothing's changed, but Josh thinks Trey McBride's a great sleeper at tight end this week. And that's going to round out our start sit sleepers and our position players. And I'm going to give you some streaming defenses like I did on my waiver pod. I like Seattle a lot at Baltimore. Seattle's defense, that is. At Baltimore. And honestly, this could go wrong for Seattle, but with them making moves on defense, their defense has been very solid the last several weeks. Baltimore's offense has been good, but Jackson tends to give up some sacks and some more prone turnovers when he gets pressured. And Seattle's defense has been doing a good job of getting to the quarterback. They've got a young, very talented secondary, especially that young rookie cornerback they have. I can't remember his name, but he's pretty solid. So I like Seattle's defense a lot this week. I think the Seattle-Baltimore game could be a very low-scoring game, probably heavily run because it's in Baltimore. It's probably going to be really cold. So I like Seattle's defense a lot this week. And then also another sneaky defense that I like is Minnesota at Atlanta. And Minnesota's defense has been very sneaky. A top 10 fantasy defense so far this year. And they're coming off 3 really solid weeks against solid teams. And now they get an Atlanta offense that really does nothing as far as offensive efficiency or putting up points. They win because their defense has been solid this year. But as far as their offense goes, they're not very great. They're not very good. Now, Taylor Heineke is going to be starting this week. So that could shake up their offense a little bit because he throws the ball a lot better and more efficient than Desmond Ridder does. But I still like Minnesota's defense. They've been getting to the quarterback some, causing some chaos, causing some turnovers. Give me some Minnesota defense this week against Atlanta. And that'll round up. That's just a couple streamers for you. And then just a couple kickers. The same ones I mentioned last week. They're still top 5 kickers. I think maybe top 8 because Blake Grupe's number 8 kicker in the league. But Dustin Hopkins this week for Cleveland at home against Arizona. Solid pickup there. Blake Grupe for New Orleans in the Dome against Chicago. Dude's been doing very well as of late, kicking the ball. And then last but not least, Brandon Aubrey for Dallas at Philadelphia. Not the best probably conditions in Philadelphia, but Aubrey kicks the ball very well and has been very successful for Dallas, and they've been letting him kick the ball a lot. So I like all 3 of those guys a lot going forward for the rest of the season, especially Aubrey because he's past his bye. And those are the guys that I like a lot at kicker. And that's pretty much going to round out our Start Sit Sleeper Pod, guys. Thank you to everybody that's been listening. All our listeners, please like, subscribe, download. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you want to hear of, what you don't want to hear any more of. And give us some ratings. Give us some good stars, 5 stars if that's an option. And we appreciate everybody. Please check out our sponsors. Support them as they support us. And then also keep Nora K, Jonesboro, and Israel in your prayers, guys. Continue to pray for those guys. We appreciate all our listeners. Thank you for everything you continue to do. And y'all keep chasing that trophy, and good luck this weekend, guys.